my friends. J.R. Dukes at your service. Appreciate everybody joining me today. I just hit the buttons to make everything go, and we are going to just take 1 second, make sure everything's coming through on all the platforms. I want to say hello real quick to everyone. If you have not done so already, please take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're from. It's always interesting to see individuals from all over the world. Hello to everyone on X, no longer Twitter, I guess, just X. And see, it looks like Twitch is now online. And of course, YouTube. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have everyone with us. Tonight, we are going to be talking about something that's going to happen Monday. Man, I tell you what a lot of news, what a lot of everything that's been going on, right? It's just an interesting couple of days, last couple of days, really an interesting week with all the Supreme Court decisions that's been coming down. Today, we're going to focus like a laser. It's going to be a little bit more of a deep dive than I normally do. It's going to be one of the legal shows that I generally dive into, but I think you're going to find it interesting, and it's important to actually take a deeper dive into this because this decision coming out Monday is extremely important to you and to me. This is the kind of case that's this case is really going to live as long as our country lives. This case is going to be referred to in the future whenever this type of issue comes up. And we're going to talk about it tonight, and I'm going to explain to you why it is so important despite what the so-called talking heads in the media tell you. You know how they are. They're going to lie to you. They're going to spin it. They're going to be talking about, oh, no one's above the law, all this other stuff. Well, I'm going to tell you why all that's nonsense and why this case is consequential. This case matters. We talked yesterday about the Chevron case and a few other cases. Well, I can assure you this Trump versus the United States of America is extremely important to each and every one of us. And again, we're going to talk extensively about it. Let me say hello real quick to some of my regular friends. By the way, I appreciate everybody who's been supporting the show. It is definitely a pleasure that everybody takes time to join and have a conversation. All right. Hey, Julianne, thanks for being here. It's good to see you again. All the way from San Diego, California. I have a son that lives over in Los Angeles. And, of course, my friend Sapphire, thank you for joining us today, my friend. All the way from Montana. And, yeah, I know you're all the way up in Montana. Now, one other thing, too, this is going to still be the call-in format. I think I posted it at the top, and I just relisted the StreamYard link. It's very simple. If you want to call in, don't want to have your face shown, no problem. Just hit that link. Hit I believe it's just like a toggle button to turn off the camera function, and you can call in. You'll pop on my screen when you see yourself in the app or whatever it takes you to. Get ready, because when I hit the button, you're live. And, again, we like to keep it PG if possible, but I'm interested in whatever your comment is or whatever your question is. You don't have to agree with me. I just like to make sure we have a conversation that's respectful, complies with YouTube guidelines, and yada, yada, yada. You know what that's all about. Okay, fantastic. We're going to start drilling in. So what do you think about all of this that's going on right now with this Joe Biden, Donald Trump stuff? Now, I don't want to start off here with a I told you so type stuff because that's not my style, but I did tell you so. I'm sorry, my humor's terrible. We have talked extensively about the fact that we all know what's before our eyes, something's seriously wrong with Joe Biden. And I want to tell you, at the debate, during that debate, I felt bad for him, and I felt bad for our country. It was really sad to see. It's something I knew that was going on, and I think I've shared my view with a few of you. What happened the other day at the debate versus the State of the Union, because remember, he came out jacked up, man. He was hammering. He was talking a mile a minute. Well, guess what? Sometimes I take some of the same medication he takes. For right now, I don't have any dementia that I know of, but I can promise you I did some checking, and there are a lot of what they call nootropics and just generally prescribed medication that you can have access to that can at least help you mitigate the effects of dementia or other diseases. For example, Provigil, which is generally prescribed to people for narcolepsy, help you stay awake. If you do a quick Google search on, especially on YouTube, they'll basically tell you this is the drug that Limitless, the movie Limitless, was kind of written around. It doesn't quite work as good as the Limitless drug says. However, it does affect people differently. It doesn't give you a buzz, doesn't give you a high, nothing like that, but it does generally help you wake up. If you have like brain fog or you have some type of whatever going on where it just seems like you're always sleepy and wanting to sleep, try that. Provigil is what it's called. I think Provigil is the actual name they sell it under. The generic name is something like Munvigil, just FYI. Additionally, they have, of course, Ritalin and other stimulant type drugs that you can take. I am 100% certain, friends, that what happened at that debate is they were worried about him coming out jacked up. Because remember, President Trump said, hey, he's going to come out, get a shot in the backside, and he's going to come up all jacked up. We're going to see the Joe Biden we saw back in January at the State of the Union debate. And that's exactly what he predicted. So what they did is they gave him a little bit of a less shot. I mean, they didn't want to see jacked up Joe right out of the shooting match here, or right out of the shot, so to speak. So what they did is they gave him probably a smaller dose, and they gave it to him closer to the time he took the podium. And the reason I say that is, if you notice, when the first round, so to speak, was happening, that's when the problems happened, right at the beginning. That's when he lost his train of thought, and he said something to the effect of that he got rid of Medicaid, or he defeated Medicaid, whatever his words are on that. I mean, it was pretty bad, and it was pretty grueling. That's my theory. Okay, that's the J.R. Dukes theory. I don't have anything specific that I can base it on, but that's definitely what I think happened. And if you have another opinion, I would encourage you to put it in the chat. One other thing, too, we have a little poll that we have. I'm curious, what do you think is going to happen? Maybe you want to hear what I got to say before you make your vote. I'm curious if you think he's going to be granted what's called total immunity, some type of qualified immunity, which is essentially a middle ground, or no immunity whatsoever. So be interested to see what the poll results are near the end. All right. Let's go ahead, and I got one or two little small things I want to get into just before we drill down on this. So let's take a look at this one or two little videos here that I got. And by the way, my friend Sapphire is here. Let me add him to this. All right, friend, how's it going today?
I'm doing good.
All right, Sapphire, appreciate you joining us. Tell everybody real quickly who you are, my friend, and how they can reach you if they'd like to reach out to you.
Sapphire. They can reach me at my YouTube channel, which is Sapphire Ridge News.
All right, good. Yeah, you got yourself a new little YouTube channel started up, so be interested to see how that does and how that grows with you. All right, bear with me. Let's take a quick view at a few of these. I got one or two quick little videos that I have on the queue, and I just want us to talk about it real quick. This is Joe Biden yesterday, right after the debate. He went to some type of, actually, it may have been this morning. It was either right after the debate or this morning at some time. I'm looking at my notes. Looks like it was sometime today. But take a look at him and listen to the comments his wife makes concerning him. I believe it's only like a 20-second clip. So here we go.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Why?
Interesting, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Can you see that on his face? He has that blank stare. He's just like he's lost. He's confused. Is that what you see when you look at him, or am I just exaggerating?
Yeah, he doesn't know where he is. That was
it's
sad.
Yeah, I agree. It's extremely sad. And I think I mentioned the other day about a friend of mine on another channel. He actually made a live call-in to the abuse hotline, I guess the adult line. There's a name for it that I'm not thinking of, but basically it's just like a child abuse line, but it's an abuse line for seniors. And he was calling in a report about Joe Biden, and it was just hilarious to watch because they were like, well, what's the patient's first name? And oh, it's Joseph. It was pretty humorous. I will say I'm trying to get away from
that.
Did you hear about it?
Yeah.
Now, Sapphire, I'm trying to get away from laughing as much, although it's hard, because I realize that this is an adult man that is truly suffering from a serious medical condition. He's in failing health. It's something he cannot help. And I have a lot of anxiety about bashing him. But I have to tell you, the reason I continue to do so is because it's so important. It's not about him. It's not about me. It's about our country. And because of that, because his enablers, his wife, whomever, will not tell him the truth, I have no choice but to speak out forcefully about what's going on and continue to sound the alarm. You think I'm wrong on that?
No, my video tomorrow is going to be on what is the nuclear football, and I'm going to go through what it actually is, some of the things that are inside of it, and how many minutes he has to decide what to do.
All right, I got one last little clip before we get into it today, and
Sure.
it's going to mess up the screen here a little bit, but I'm not sure how it's going to look on the screen, but it doesn't matter. Take a look at this clip real quick. It's only like 19 minutes.
I saw in him then the same character that I see in him today. And even though he has faced unimaginable tragedies, his optimism is undaunted. His strength is unshakable. His hope is undeterred.
It's just sad. It really is sad. I mean, I think the only good thing about what happened the other day is now people can clearly see what we have already known. And remember, the people that actually should be called out on this and a very sincere, forceful, yet negative light is the people like on MSNBC, like the Morning Joe, the Joe Scarborough, his associates that work with him, because these are the same people that have constantly lied to us day in and day out, that we cannot believe our lying eyes. I've said many times, it's like a dog peeing on our legs and they're trying to tell us it's raining outside. And we have known better. We all know better. And it's sad and it's a shame that they have allowed this to happen. And now it's the last minute. There's a Ohio law that specifically states that by August 11th, they have to solidify who their candidate is. So they're running out of time. There's no way this 81-year-old man in the health condition that he's presently in is going to be able to do this job until he's 86 years of age. Any 2-year-old idiot knows this. And I did some looking on some actuary tables, which basically project how old you should live to based on your current age. And even at 81 years of age, it's roughly a 50-50 chance that an 81-year-old white man in the United States will live to see his 86th birthday. And that's a person in average normal health for an 81-year-old. Outstanding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unbelievable is probably the word. All right. As you see on your screen right here, folks, we're going to be going over this petition here filed by Donald Trump's attorneys. And it is essentially a brief. And then I have a little cheat sheet that I made up, and it is going to explain exactly what is at stake coming up here Monday. We're going to have the decision Monday. We know for a fact it's coming down Monday. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because of the fact that this essentially allows, I guess, things to cool down, because a lot of the public's not going to be happy when they see this decision, especially the woke liberals. So I think it's kind of a good idea. It's a week. That's a holiday week. You got the 4th of July, obviously, coming up. Why not? I think that's great. And in this, in these decisions that have recently come down, just a quick FYI, you see the justices of the Supreme Court. And as of right now, these are the justices in the order from the left to the right, as far as the most woke liberal to the most conservative, all the way on the right hand side right there. So it's a work in progress, if you will, and we're going to see exactly how that works out. So let me tell you one thing here is we're going to take that deep dive in here. One of the cases you have to remember, because this is going to provide some context, there is a case called Nixon versus Fitzgerald from 1982. And yes, it is that Richard Nixon all the way back. And essentially what this case decided was that a president had total immunity when it comes to civil type of judgments. And that's going to be important, if for no other reason, because the Supreme Court tries to be consistent in their decisions, meaning if they've ruled one way on one day, they try to be consistent, because it basically allows the court to look more valid. It just looks more prestigious. It's just something that they always try to do, because it's common sense. You don't want a court, the highest court in the land, that keeps changing their mind every 10 or 15 years. Now, occasionally they will change their mind and they'll make a reversal, like Brown versus the Board of Education, which of course was a segregation case a long time ago. So anyway, I just want you to remember that, because I think this context is absolutely critical in regards to going through this. Now, we're not going to go through every little piece of this, so don't worry, because you're going to find that this particular brief, again, this is from the president, his attorneys. It's, how many pages is this thing? Because it's long. It's like 60 some pages, and we're not going to go through all 60 some pages, so don't worry. But I have highlighted some, and we're going to talk about it as we go through it. So the question that's before the Supreme Court that's going to be answered Monday, and again, this is prepared by President Trump's attorneys, is whether, and if so, to what extent does a former president enjoy presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during his tenure in office. Now, when we listen to the video, the live video of the actual proceeding, I think it was very clear that the Supreme Court is poised to rule that the president has some type of immunity. I don't think anything different. And Sapphire, you listened to that with me on that recording. Is that the impression that you had at the same time, that there's going to be some type of ruling where the president at least has qualified immunity?
Yeah, he's going to get qualified immunity.
I think
that's everything that I think is reasonable. He may not get total immunity, but he will get immunity for every official act.
I think that's coming down the pipeline, and we'll just have to see how that pans out. So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and drive into it here. I think we're gonna start right about here. All right, I highlighted some relevant parts here that I want to make sure everybody understands. All right, the president says from 1789 to 2023, no former or current president faced criminal charges for his official acts for good reason. The president cannot function, and the presidency itself cannot retain its vital independence if the president faces criminal prosecution for official acts once he leaves office. I think that's pretty understandable. He also references the case that we talked about a little bit ago on Nixon versus Fitzgerald. The president's personal vulnerability, we're talking a civil context now, to such prosecution would inevitably distort the president's decision-making process. So that is an important thing to remember as we talk about this. And I kind of wrote up this little write-up right here that we can all go over, and it's going to kind of list it in an order that I think we can all understand. So imagine this. Imagine you're president of the United States, and you have to make decisions for the entire country, right? I think that's pretty easy to understand. If you are worried that at the end of your term, there's a pair of handcuffs waiting for you, an average person is obviously going to weigh that when they're making decisions. And because of that, they're going to be much less likely to take bold decisions. Sapphire, agreed or disagree on that?
I agree. It will
All right.
so handcuff the presidency, he will be afraid to make decisions.
Yeah, I think that's very clear, and it's kind of one of them things. I don't really see how any of the woke liberals could disagree with that, but they do disagree with that. And again, just to remind everybody that's watching us, in the context of the president of the United States, there's always times where they have to make decisions that might not seem like such a big deal because they're president of the United States, but they could really have jeopardy when they leave office. A quick example on top of my mind is President Obama. He ordered some drones overseas to attack and actually kill Americans. That's clearly unconstitutional. And as far as these woke Democrats are concerned, that are essentially fighting this and have really caused this all to come to a head, they think that that's perfectly legitimate. If if they don't rule, at least with qualified immunity, in my opinion, the office of the president, and here's the biggest takeaway I want everybody to think of and take away from this discussion today. I think the deep state, and we talk about what the deep state is from time to time, but the deep state would have effectively taken over the executive branch, aka the presidential branch of government. And remember, our Constitution has 3 equal but distinct branches of government. You have the legislative branch, executive branch, and of course, the judicial branch. And if a president, the executive branch, is worried about a pair of handcuffs waiting for him when he leaves office, basically you have the de facto acquisition of the executive branch by the judicial branch. Is that a hard concept to understand, Sapphire, or is that pretty straightforward?
That's pretty straightforward.
Okay. All right. Well, let's continue on. All right. We've talked about the Fitzgerald, the Nixon Fitzgerald case. Very important to remember that, because that is essentially a type of precedent. And I want to go ahead and welcome real quickly, Gloria. Appreciate you joining us. Let me see if I got any quick questions in the comments here. Julianne, the panic, I see from the Democrat. Yeah, they are definitely panicking. There is no doubt about that. And again, welcome to Gloria. Folks, any questions? Like I said, you can join us by video or call in, or you can simply type it in, and I will get to the questions as time allows here. All right, moving on here. All right, so the legal question: does a sitting president have absolute immunity from liability for civil damages based on his official act? That was the question in the Fitzgerald case, and they ended up having, it's important that we know this, it was a 5-4 split decision. Now, oftentimes you hear pundits on TV say, oh, the Supreme Court is not supposed to be political. Well, that might be true in theory and on the surface, but in reality, it's always political. It's political, in my opinion, by design. Of course, the president, who obviously is a political creature, appoints a justice for the Supreme Court, and then they're confirmed, or I guess not confirmed, by the U.S. Senate. But to actually get on the bench, they have to be confirmed by the Senate. And this particular case, again, was a 5-4 decision. Now, I went and I drilled down on this particular case. I wanted to know the 5 individuals that said a president has absolute immunity in a civil context. Exactly who were these individuals? Who were they appointed by? And again, they were appointed by a Republican president. Republican. Paul Stevens, Republican, and we all remember Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed by Republican President Ronald Reagan. Now, interestingly, the dissenting judges, there was 4 of them, and you may remember Thurgood Marshall, that was a Democrat, Byron White, Democrat, but there were 2 Republicans, Blackmun and Brennan, that were also part of the dissenting opinion, and that happens occasionally. So that's just the way they looked at that. All right. So moving on here, we have different types of immunity. Okay, it's important that we understand that. First of all, when you hear the pundits on TV saying, "Oh, it's obscene that people have immunity. No one's above the law," that's what they like to say. They like to remind you that if someone has total immunity, it's an aberration. It's not in our tradition. That everything's going to be destroyed as a result of certain individuals, specifically the President of the United States, having immunity. And folks, that's a lie. That's a lie. And the reason it's a lie is we currently have officials that have immunity, either some type of total immunity or like the police have some kind of qualified immunity. And that's been all over the news. So I'm sure you have heard of that from time to time. All right. Judicial immunity. Judges have absolute immunity from civil liability for their judicial actions. And of course, the reasoning is pretty self-explanatory. It ensures that judges can make decisions independently and without fear of personal repercussions, right? Anything difficult in that, Sapphire, or is that pretty easy to know?
That's pretty easy to understand.
All right. And then you have legislative immunity. Members of Congress, U.S. senators, and representatives have absolute immunity for actions taken in the course of their legislative duties. As a matter of fact, you can be a senator or a legislator and speak from what's called the well, where they give a speech inside of the House or inside of the Senate chamber. And at that particular well, at that podium, you cannot even be sued for slander for what you say at that podium. It is a truly a free speech zone, and nothing negative can happen to you as a result of standing there and speaking words. And of course, the reasons for that again is obvious. State legislators, they have similar protections at a state level. They are absolutely immune from any type of prosecution. Now, executive immunity, presidents, as established in Nixon versus Fitzgerald, this case we just talked about from the 1980s, a president has absolute immunity from civil damages for official acts. So the president of the United States, that office already has absolute immunity. They're acting like they're creating a new legal doctrine or a new theory in law. And it's just, again, folks, it's just another lie. Some of us may know, especially if you watch my channel, the police officers, law enforcement officers, they have qualified immunity. And sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a terrible thing. But I have to admit, when it comes to police officers, I'm still on the fence as to if it's good or if it's bad. Now, think of it this way. Absolute immunity means just what it says. It's 100% immunity. Down the tier a little bit is what's called qualified immunity. And basically, police officers and other law enforcement officials have qualified immunity, which protects them from civil suits unless they have violated what's called clearly established statutory or constitutional rights that a reasonable person would have known. We see this all the time on TV. Something happens involving a police officer, and generally speaking, they cannot be prosecuted, especially on a civil in a civil manner, for what they did, unless there's already essentially been a case that's been adjudicated and litigated, and effectively they were under notice that that particular behavior was a violation of the law. I know that sounds a little convoluted, but I hope that everybody gets the gist. Any questions on that so far? Sapphire, any questions on that? Is that pretty straightforward?
That's pretty straightforward. When we get to legal immunity, I have some comments.
Okay. All right. That's fine. All right. And let's see. We're going to turn back here. Okay, Julianne, the big stuff takes to Congress. Say that's exactly right. I want to say hello to Rose Marie Fier. It's always good to have you in the chat, young lady. And see, Moose Call. They have got to have it. Let me make sure I read this right. They have got to have it in different forms. They have to be protected. Yeah, I think that's probably correct. Obviously, I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I am definitely a pro-police type of individual. I don't want to get off on any tangents, but I think policing could definitely be improved dramatically. And that's a whole other multiple video series. I think there's a lot of things that we can do and do differently. I think the majority of police officers are great individuals, and we definitely need to have police. However, the system as is, let's be honest about it. We know that it can definitely be improved. But again, it's a whole other situation. The reasoning behind the qualified immunity is it protects officials who make reasonable but mistaken judgments about legal questions, ensuring they can perform their duties without the constant threat of litigation. I get that. I think that, again, is pretty straightforward. Other individuals that have some type of immunity, prosecutors, isn't that ironic? All these prosecutors, like at the Department of Justice, Fannie Willis, sweet Fannie Willis, right? The gift that keeps on giving. These individuals are generally protected with, and when I say absolute immunity, there's no general about it. It's just like the word says, absolute immunity. Now, that doesn't mean criminal immunity, but they do have absolute immunity from civil suits for action taken as part of their prosecutorial functions, such as initiating and pursuing criminal cases. So, for example, Fannie Willis could not be prosecuted for bringing charges against Donald Trump. Now, she could potentially face criminal charges for any malfeasance while in office. That's a whole different situation. Remember, we've talked a lot on this program about different fraud that her and Nathan Wade have been accused of. I think it's called honest service fraud. In other words, that would be like if, hey, I'll make sure you get this contract with the DA's office if you go ahead and give me 10% back in a kickback. That's clearly illegal, and it's pretty straightforward. Diplomats under international law, including the Vienna Conventions and diplomatic relations, diplomats have immunity from prosecution in the host country. The reasoning for that is pretty straightforward. It's to facilitate international relations. Even government contractors, in some cases, government contractors may receive immunity for actions taken while performing their contractual duties, particularly in the defense and intelligence areas, right? I think that again is, to be honest with you, when I looked that up, I was a little surprised by that, but it makes sense when I read the reasoning to ensure contractors can carry out their task without the threat of legal repercussions. And let's be honest about it. As I've said many times on this program, I bleed red, white, and blue. I love America. Every bone in my body loves America. But like all countries, we're not a perfect country. We have good things. We have things that we can work on. I mean, it's really just that straightforward. And it's what we're talking about is some of the issues that can be worked on. All right. I think that's good enough on there. So at any rate, the conclusion I wrote here is that immunity for public officials is complex and obviously is a controversial issue. All right. Now, immunities and their scopes. I'm not going to go over every little single line. Basically, we know the difference between civil immunity and criminal immunity. When you think of civil, think of money. Is that pretty clear on that, Sapphire? Yeah. I think everybody understands civil is going to be money, and then you're going to have, criminal liability. Basically with civil, you're going to lose your money. Basically with criminal, you might lose your freedom. You'll be put into a cage. I think it's pretty straightforward on that. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I got a comment.
Go ahead and make your comment.
There's a guy on the stand right now in the YSL trial, Little Woody.
Right.
And he was given limited immunity. He was not told that if he accepted immunity, that he cannot plead the fifth on the stand.
Right. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It's another RICO trial, right? With Fannie Willis and Fulton County. Yeah. Okay.
He got on the stand and he halfway through pled the fifth, and they held him in contempt, put him in jail for the weekend.
The reason they put him in jail was because they gave him immunity, state immunity. Right. And once they give you immunity, generally you have to testify. Right. But his attorney, whoever the attorney is, needs to go back to law school. And the judge, in my opinion, is also corrupt and inept and all kinds of other things I can say.
Right.
He actually has a case by pleading the fifth. And I've had people say, what are you talking about? He's got immunity. He's got state immunity. Right. He does not have federal immunity.
And they did
conceivably, he did not get federal immunity.
Yeah. They did not give him blanket state immunity. They gave him limited.
Yep. If it's limited immunity, he wouldn't have to testify, as far as I understand the law. And apparently his attorneys did not know enough to explain to the judge that I need federal complete immunity in order to testify, because the charges here are very serious. My understanding is they've accused him of a murder of some individual. Right. So, I mean, it doesn't get much more serious than that.
Part of that ex parte meeting, he apparently said, I will testify that I killed this individual. And the prosecutor said that she would prosecute him for perjury. Well, what if that's the truth?
Well, we're definitely conflating a lot of things here. First of all, that ex parte meeting, any 2-year-old idiot knows that's illegal, period, under the law. A judge cannot have an ex parte meeting other than very, very limited reasons. And if I remember right, under Georgia law, it has to be, I forgot what the very limited area was, but
Yeah,
it
it's
just,
limited.
it
has to
doesn't,
be
it doesn't
scheduling.
apply in this.
Yeah, it has
Scheduling?
to be scheduling
Yeah.
or a TPO, temporary restraining order, or a permanent restraining order. That's it.
Yeah, but even with them exceptions or whatever you want to label them as, the judge still has to notify the
Right.
other side essentially immediately that this
Mm-hmm.
meeting took place. Here's the nature of the meeting. Here's a deposition or a transcript of this
And
particular meeting. I mean, it's just very
here's
clear.
something interesting. Judge Christina Peterson was just removed from the bench for holding an ex parte meeting and not informing the other side.
So far, that Fulton County, Georgia, is a
Yep.
corrupt county. It's been
Yeah, it is.
corrupt ever since I can remember. As a matter of fact, if it was not for JFK, there would never have been an MLK. And the reason for
Right.
that is Fulton County put him in jail, and they basically lost the room.
Right.
I'm not exaggerating. It
Oh, I
was
know.
JFK that called Fulton County officials and said, you need to let that boy out, and you need to let him out now. And I think it was 2020 or 2021, Fulton County actually issued an apology to the public and the Luther King family.
Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And a lot of people still don't know that. But Fulton County, ladies and gentlemen, is, in my opinion, synonymous with corruption. I think I got good basis to say that on. So, anyways, great points, Sapphire. Great points. All right, now let's go ahead and let's drill down on this here. Just some different parameters that I wanted to look at pertaining to the president and the situation that he is that he is facing, right? Because I wanted to know that basically, if you have a situation where the Supreme Court has already granted absolute immunity to a president for civil immunity, what is so hard about granting it on the reverse? Because they want to stay consistent with their rulings, right? I mean, I think that's
Right.
pretty. I think that's pretty straightforward on it. So, the
Yeah.
U.S. Go ahead, Sapphire.
I think it was either Judge Alito or Kavanaugh said,
Mm-hmm.
we are not making this decision for Donald Trump. We are making this decision for future presidents. And I thought
Exactly,
that
a
was
decision for the ages. Yes.
right.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what's going on here. A decision for the ages. Okay, and listen, moving on with this, we know that already, and the wisdom our founding fathers had was quite substantial. They put in the Constitution essentially a compromise to guard against a rogue president. We already have it in the Constitution, and we're probably all familiar with it. It's impeachment. If you have a president that's engaged in some kind of illegal behavior, what the Constitution refers to as high crimes and misdemeanors. And of course, today it essentially means anything that they decide to impeach him for. With a simple majority vote in the House, a president is impeached. And then it goes over to the Senate, and I believe it's a 3/4 vote. Then the president is
Right.
simply removed from office. Now,
Yeah, it takes the vote of 60 senators. We haven't
Exactly.
had 60 senators for 80 years.
Exactly. Yeah, it's and you know what? I think it's Alan Dershowitz that has came out with a book. I think it's one of his recent books, but he refers to what's going on since the 1990s as the age of impeachment. Because think of all the impeachments that have taken place or have been threatened in just recent memory. And this is what the founding fathers were very concerned with for a very long time. Was this age or this situation where impeachment becomes political? You don't like the president, you don't like his policies, you don't like what he's doing, so you throw him out. And that's kind of what's been going on. But again, I don't want to get too far off the topic here. I just the point
Right.
for the Constitution right now, there's already a mechanism to get rid of a rogue police officer, right?
Right.
It's pretty straightforward. Okay, now I was checking on concerns, what I called concerns of implications about qualified immunity versus absolute immunity for a president. Okay, and I went through and I came up with this analysis here. Qualified immunity for a president, the positives, some people would say this, is a balance of accountability and protection. Accountability. Qualified immunity allows for some level of accountability if a president's actions clearly violate established laws. Now, on the other side of it is, it's even with qualified immunity versus total immunity, you still have, and this is the problem here, qualified immunity might lead to prolonged legal battles to determine whether actions fall under official duties or private conduct. And I also made a note that it serves as a distraction. So that's an important point for us to ponder for just a second. If the Supreme Court hypothetically comes back with absolute immunity for the president for official actions, it's all over. And so, the cases are dead like Rover, dead all over, done. Put a fork in it. They're done. If the Supreme Court comes back with this qualified immunity, it's still good news for Donald Trump. Make no mistake about it. But what's going to happen is the cases are going to be what they call in the legal system remanded to the lower court. So it goes back down to the lower courts, essentially the main courtroom is probably the best way to think about it. And then the president's going to have to assert, Judge, this particular act that I'm charged with was part of my official responsibilities. And if you think about it, it makes sense. For example, the president, among other charges, is charged with interfering with an election. Well, it's easy to argue that a president's job, his normal duties, his official duties in part, include, but are not limited to, ensuring elections are fair, safe, free. Put your own adjective in there.
Right.
I think that's pretty clear. But it's going to have to be litigated and worked out in the lower courts. And let's say the president loses. Judge says, no, that was not part of your official acts. Well, guess what? It goes right back up the court. Goes right back up the chain, all the way to the Supreme Court. Boom.
Right.
Now, again, it's a positive because it delays it and it goes further. The obvious negative is it's just more litigation and it just stretches on. But I want to be real clear about one thing too, and I want everybody to understand this. I have talked a long time on this channel pertaining to legal issues. You don't want an attorney at law. You want an attorney at stall, especially if you got the dollars to stretch it out, because the more you stretch it out, the longer you stretch it out, the better off you are. I always like to say it this way: justice delayed is justice denied. And by that, I don't necessarily mean you're getting away with anything. At the same time, if you're caught up in the system, you have a duty to yourself, a fiduciary duty to yourself, to win, to keep your butt out of jail, right? I mean, it's common sense, right? It's an adversary system of justice we have, and you have to play the cards you're dealt. So Donald Trump is no different than you or me in the sense that he needs to play and manipulate and take advantage of everything he can do in a legal context to win his case. And this is one of the many things he can do. Again, delay. And guess what happens if he's able to delay it to November? Any ideas, Sapphire?
They're all over.
It's all over like Red Rover, because once he's elected, then he's in a different category. And I don't even think the judicial system at that point could actually summon him to appear before them, because he's the president-elect. He's in a different category. And then, of course, once he's sworn in, if he wins, once he's sworn in January of 2025, then he's actually the persona of the executive branch. Donald Trump becomes the vision of justice. I mean, I don't want to make it like it's a religious experience, but it's true. He becomes one of the three branches of government, and the other branches cannot touch him short of the impeachment. Did I explain that? Did I explain that clear enough? Anybody got any questions on that?
I would bring up that once he is elected, not only do all of these cases go away, but a sitting president cannot be sued.
That is a fact.
Until he's out of office, and that will be 4 years. So, everything gets delayed for 4 years.
That's exactly right. When you become the president, you are the executive branch of the federal government. And we don't like to use words like king and stuff like that. He's not a king,
Right.
but he's pretty damn close. I mean, I'm just being
Yeah.
straight up. He's pretty close. Again, the founding fathers and their wisdom had a compromise resolution they put in there, aka impeachment, and then removal if it's voted
Right.
on and it's necessary. So that's just
One
the
of the
way that
things
they have it.
on impeachment, one of the things that Dems like to gloss over is that in the Constitution it says impeached by the House and convicted by the Senate, then he can be removed.
That's exactly
So
what
if
it is.
tried by the House and found not guilty in the Senate, it's all over.
Exactly. And like I said, that's what the founding fathers put in there. Let me go to a couple comments here. Let me make sure I catch up on these.
Yeah.
No weapons. Mass destruction was until from revised. Thank you, Julianne. The lead attorney is covered. Yeah, he's been doing a real good job. I've actually seen a couple of his programs. Woody, that's the guy's name. Yeah, Woody is a crack up. Yeah. Yeah, he is hilarious. I've seen a little
He's
bit of
hilarious.
that.
Yeah.
They seem to be how they
One
roll
of
in
the
Georgia. Yeah,
channels,
they have it bad.
covering that is Kat Naughton Williams. She's really good. She's concise. And
Cat Williams, I don't know if I've seen
Yeah.
that channel or not, but yeah, they have a lot
her
of people
channel is
covering.
called Cat Not Williams because there's a
Cat
Cat
Knott.
Williams that's a comedian. So she put the knot in the middle to let people know I'm not them.
There's a guy named I like this guy's channel too. I think it's a father-son team, but it's like Your Attorney or something. I'll have to look it up. But they seem like they do a pretty good job covering a lot of things too. The truth is, I'm
Yeah,
always so busy
I
working
like
on
him.
videos or whatever. I don't have a lot of time to be checking around. I want to say a quick
I
shout
think
out to
it's-
American. Give me 1 second there, Sever.
Yeah.
I want to say a quick hello to American Nana. Thank you for joining me always, sweetheart. Let's see. I can't see my new puppy. Oh, well, he ate your glasses. That's terrible. That's all right. You don't have to see us today. You can just listen. Sapphire, go ahead and finish your comments. I'm going to jump back into this documentary.
The channel I think is called The Attorney Who Cares. It's a younger guy who's an attorney, and his dad is an attorney.
That might be the one I'm
about
thinking of. That might be the one I'm thinking of. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got you. All right, fair enough. Let's jump back into this. I'm almost done with this particular document, and let's continue on with this. All right. Now, you've heard me mention what I call deep state fears pertaining to, let's just pretend, God forbid, the Supreme Court comes back and says, guess what? The President of the United States does not have, or a former President of the United States does not have any immunity for criminal actions. Let's just say that happens. Well, obviously, that's where the deep state fears come in. And what I put here is prosecutors with political motivations or motives could exploit the ambiguity of qualified immunity. That's what I don't like about qualified immunity. That's the reason why we need the total immunity. They could basically, they can manipulate, is probably the best way to say it, to bring charges against a president contributing to fears of judicial overreach, inconsistent ruling. The need for the courts to rule on each and every one of these cases could result in inconsistent application of the law. We all know how that works out, and we just kind of went over that. Now, if he is to receive absolute immunity provides clear protection for a president's official acts. It prevents lengthy and distracting litigation. Independence-wise, it ensures that the president can make decisions without fear of personal legal repercussions, preserving the executive branch independence. I think that is extremely important. Additionally, you have to consider that absolute immunity would uphold what we call the separation of powers. Absolute immunity maintains a clear separation of powers, preventing the judiciary from undermining the executive branch. And again, on the deep state concerns, it addresses fears of politically motivated legal actions, aka Fannie Willis and company, by ensuring that the president is not subject to prosecution for official acts. And one of the justices on the Supreme Court, I believe it was Alito, as you said earlier, Sapphire, basically said that, hey, number one, we're writing a law for the ages. And then Chief Justice Roberts, one of the comments he made that really stuck in my mind, and he's talking about this lawfare. He didn't use that word, but that's what he was talking about. He said, what is going on now might be the new norm. Think about that. That might be the new norm that we're experiencing right now. And at least in my mind, that's extremely concerning. Any comment on that, Sefer?
Yeah, I watched most of that coverage, and I was just really like, where are some of these people coming from? He has to have immunity so that if something goes wrong on a military strike, the other side of the aisle can't turn around and charge him like the incident with Obama. If there's no immunity and Trump gets into office, Trump's attorney general can turn around and file charges against Obama. And that's why I've always said the president has to have immunity. We have to put a stop to this.
It's absolutely imperative that I'm hoping they come back with absolute immunity. But I just want everybody to know that if it is a qualified immunity for official acts, that's going to work too. They both will work, but clearly the absolute immunity is the better option. It's consistent with the past rulings that the U.S. Supreme Court has made, specifically in the Nixon case, Nixon versus Fitzgerald. It's extremely important that try to have some consistency in their rulings, and I just hope they can overcome their disdain for Donald Trump. I hope they can overcome the I know right now they're really worried about their image, and I hope that they can just put that out of their mind, because right now it doesn't really matter what these woke liberals think, these socialists think. Right now what's important is that they get this right, because folks, if the deep state is able to take over the executive branch, the biggest concern I have is that any type of populist hero in the future, we decide to vote someone into office to right all the injustices that's going on right now, it's history. It's over with. It's never going to happen again, because it doesn't matter who they are. If they become president and they do the hard work and do what needs to be done to shake things up, Donald Trump would call it draining the swamp, then they can be assured there's a set of handcuffs waiting on them when they leave office, especially if the party coming into power is the opposite power. But even that is not a prerequisite for the fears that I have to come to light. You can still have, for example, the Republicans stay in power if you have another Fani Willis. Remember, there's 2,300 plus prosecutors, solicitors. There's all different names for these individuals, but each one of these people have the power to pull any one of us in and file charges on us and have us put in a cage. Can you imagine that's the way it works? The United States is the only country, the only developed country in the world that allows these prosecutors, these solicitors, to do what they do without any oversight whatsoever. Now, the state of Georgia has recently passed a judicial oversight commission that's supposed to kind of monitor these DAs and Fani Willis and company and stuff like that. But what I can tell you is they're a long way from perfecting this. They should have mechanisms in place to make sure a political prosecution cannot happen. Political prosecutions are already highly unconstitutional in the Constitution right now. But who's to say it's a political persecution / prosecution? It's in the mind of the beholder. And like I just said, if a DA says that I have a legitimate gripe, then I have a legitimate case. But I mean, there's no one to appeal to. That's the problem with all this nonsense. Comment? Anything on that?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of this nonsense is, like you say, nonsense. But the scary part is that we have a president who doesn't have all of his faculties and who's required to make snap decisions.
I agree. They have to have the ability to do it.
one of the issues in the debate the other night that got glossed over is when Biden said that there are no troops in Ukraine. On Monday, he signed an order stating that military contractors are now allowed to go to Ukraine. That's a build-up to the war.
That's some very scary things that are going on. There's no doubt about that. You know what's even ironic? By the way, I want to welcome Zach into the group. Zach, good to see you as always, my friend. So I want you to think about this here. Joe Biden himself, using the same rules, the same atmosphere that Donald Trump is facing right now. When Joe Biden leaves office, theoretically, technically speaking, he could face, let's just say, manslaughter charges for the 13 officers that were killed in Afghanistan because of his terrible withdrawal from Afghanistan that was contrary to military advice. His own advisors told him not to do it, but he did it anyways. And that alone is enough in a normal court setting to be some type of charge of some type of negligent homicide. In other words, if in the real world, let's say the real world, if I made a decision against professional advice when I have a fiduciary duty to someone else, and I went against professional advice and did it anyways, and it resulted in the injury / death, specifically the death of whoever my fiduciary was, I'm in trouble, friend. I'm going to be brought up on charges. That's the world we live in.
He's in a lot of trouble because he insulted the veterans the other night when he said that no one died in Afghanistan. And I kind of wish that Trump had talked about the 13 soldiers that died in the withdrawal.
Yeah, no, it's pretty striking. I'm almost through with this. I got the conclusion here, and I want to drill down on this right here. Then we'll shoot the breeze for a minute. All right, I wanted to see what is going to be the outcome. My prediction of the outcome of this case coming up Monday. Now, I've already said I hope it's going to be the absolute immunity. So if you look at the precedent, you have that Nixon versus Fitzgerald's case in 1982. That highly and heavily leans that they want to be consistent. So that kind of leans towards a absolute immunity. Then you have a case called Clinton versus Jones from 97. This is where the court held that a sitting president does not have immunity from civil litigations for actions taken before office or unrelated to official duty. So that's contrary in a way to the Nixon Fitzgerald case, right? Then you have judicial philosophies. Generally favoring a strong executive branch may support broad immunity to ensure the president can do their duties without fear of any type of litigation, court interference. And of course, the liberal justices, they typically want accountability. So that's kind of a negative. Now, obviously, we have a conservative court, so that would bode well for an absolute type immunity. In a political context and the political climate that we're in right now, a case involving a former president can influence justices' considerations. Trust me on this, the justices are people, and they're just like you and me, and they want to be thought of highly, and they want to be thought of fair. So the rationale for an absolute immunity would be following the precedent in Nixon versus Fitzgerald, the court might rule that a president has absolute immunity for actions within the scope of their official duties. And it allows for, as we've been talking about, executive independence. Now, obviously, this would be good for the country, but, there may be some criticism blowback on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, on qualified immunity, the rationale, the court may strike a balance. This would be the splitting the baby, the King Solomon verdict, if you will.
Right.
Providing qualified immunity that protects the president from most lawsuits, but allows exceptions for clear violations of established law. This approach would acknowledge the need for accountability while still protecting the president from frivolous litigation. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, the situation that's not going to happen, the no immunity, it just the rationale would be, okay, no one's above the law, that type of nonsense. we've all been hearing in the news and in the media. I really hate this idea, but to be fair, I had to consider it. The court might rule the president is not immune from criminal prosecution for official acts, which would ensure the presidents can be held accountable. I went ahead and my conclusion would be this: given the current composition of the Supreme Court with a conservative majority, the court might lean towards granting significant immunity to the president. And I think the hypothetical ruling that I'm going to go with is, and again, this is a win, but it's not what I want. But I think clearly, after I compute everything through my brain and I look at all the statements on the record, I have to go with qualified immunity is probably the most likely scenario. I mean, we keep our fingers crossed and hope that the absolute immunity comes through. It says what I wrote has qualified immunity for official acts. For official acts, the president would enjoy qualified immunity, protecting them from most lawsuits, but allowing exceptions for clear violations of the law. This ruling would reflect the middle ground, maintaining executive stability while ensuring accountability. That's the bottom line that I have with that. So my question, Sapphire, is what say you?
I think they should give the president total immunity because this is no longer about Donald Trump. This is about any president. And we don't want the president to be afraid of being sued so that they don't make decisions that would protect our country, because there are some decisions that have to be made that are snap decisions. You have seconds to make the decision.
I agree with that. And I think another thing, too, that needs to be emphasized is that if the Supreme Court does not come back, in my opinion, with absolute immunity, I think what you're going to see is every president from this day forward is essentially going to issue pardons to everyone and their brother before they leave office. And I think they're going to also pardon themselves. The Supreme Court has not ruled as to whether or not a president can pardon themselves. I'm really hesitant to say which way they would rule. If it's a conservative court, they may rule that that's constitutional. A liberal court would definitely rule it's not constitutional. The way I look at it is, okay, a president's not above the law, but he's not below the law. If I can be pardoned by the president, why couldn't the president pardon himself? You got Joe Biden right now. I can guarantee you, if he doesn't pardon his son, number one, he's an idiot. But number two, he's going to grant what's called clemency. And the way I understand it is basically there won't be no jail time. It's just kind of like, okay, what's happened, go home.
Well,
send no more type of thing.
My comment on that is a comment was made the other night at the debate about Hunter being found guilty of felony gun crimes. And Joe Biden said that's a lie. That didn't happen.
Right. Yeah, it's clear that we have a president that is not functioning on all cylinders, to be perfectly blunt about it. I don't think there's really any big mystery to that. So any rate. All right. So Sapphire, I'm going to let you go at this point. You got anything you want to say? How can people reach you again? What's your channel name? I'll give you another shout out.
Channel name is Sapphire Ridge News. You're on YouTube.
All right, and I know you got a new channel, so I wish you luck on that. Go ahead.
And I'm going to open an account on X.
Fantastic. Well, when you get all that information, we'll pass it along. And again, thanks for joining us today. It's good to have my friend Sapphire with us. Folks, we have a very serious issue before the Supreme Court right now. It's going to be decided Monday. It's guaranteed Monday, and that's per Chief Justice John Roberts. This is his court, his schedule. He said it's going down Monday. I, for one, am predicting a minimum of qualified immunity. Let's keep our fingers crossed and let's hope that it all works out the way we intend, as far as I personally hope there's some kind of absolute immunity. That's my sincere hope. Folks, if you don't mind, pray with me 1 second for our country and for our people as a whole. Father, we ask that you continue to bless us. Have your Holy Spirit over each and every one of us, including our leaders, even if we don't agree with them. We ask for your blessing and wisdom on them all, that we can go in a direction that glorifies you and pleasing to you. Be with each and every one of us, our families, our countries, and we just pray for things to work out in a way and manner pleasing to you. We always ask for your direction, your guarding, your providential care. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Friends, it's always a pleasure when you join me. Thank you so much for everyone that supports the channel. It does mean everything in the world to me. I want to thank all my followers today on the X platform. We got quite a few on X and, of course, YouTube, and my friend on Twitch, as always. Folks, I always say, keep that mind free. Never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.